Greetings, bike travelers and bike packers. Welcome to another episode of Chainwheel Diaries, stories about bike travel told by the travelers themselves. I'm your host, Brian Berlin. Today's guest is Stephen Growden, a retired high school social studies teacher who has ridden dozens of organized bike tours. Stephen has chosen different tour types and tour providers to match the type of adventure he's seeking. If you are contemplating joining a bike tour and you're wondering about the options, you'll want to tune in to this episode. Quick reminder, Chainwheel Diaries is available on Spotify and Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks for tuning in wherever you are, and if you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe. Now let's meet Stephen Growden. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hi, glad to be here, Brian.
We were introduced by one of my recent guests, Karen to Kent, and you rode together. You were both riders on South Korea, Japan trip, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, this was last year, tour organized by TDA, Tour d'Afrique, and the tour is called the Journey to the East. And we rode the length of South Korea from Seoul to Busan, and then flew to Nagasaki and proceeded to ride pretty much the length of Japan from Nagasaki up to Sapporo. So that's where I met Karen. Had a great time.
Well, she certainly sold me on that trip. I'll have to figure out how to pull this off one of these days. Well, let's start with you. Where are you and what are you up to these days?
So I'm Stephen Growden. I live with my wife in Seattle. We live in the neighborhood of Queen Anne. We've been residents of Seattle for 35 years. I am a former high school social studies teacher. I taught high school social studies at a public high school nearby for 20 years. And I retired about 4 years ago at the end of the 2022 school year. So now that I'm retired, I have a lot more time to engage in hobbies, pastimes, and passions, first and foremost of which is long distance bike riding.
I don't want to brag, but I was pretty good social studies student. I just wonder if I could have kept up with the modern curriculum.
Yeah. Students haven't changed, technology has. So if you love history, if you love social studies, it'll work. There are new tools and new challenges, but it's a great subject. I certainly enjoy teaching.
Are you doing any substituting or are you
Nope,
completely
nope.
divorced?
The last day of teaching in June of 22 was the last day I walked out of a school. So I had a wonderful time as a teacher, and now I am very happily retired and very busy.
All right, good. Tell the listeners and me how you got started in bike adventuring.
Great subject. So, growing up, I would ride my bike to junior high school and high school every day. That was a few miles. So, I grew up riding a bicycle. And then I went to college. I rode to classes. After college, though, I basically gave it up. I didn't have a bicycle. And then I went to biz school. The summer of 1990, I graduated from business school. I had the summer off and I said, wow, this is a rare opportunity, this break in my life. I have no commitments. Let me do something really adventurous, crazy, and unexpected. So I found this organization that was then called Bike Centennial. Today it's called Adventure Cycling. And they had this wild adventure called the Transamerica. I signed up for it. And the summer of 1990, I joined up with 11 other people and we rode the full Transamerica route self-contained. That expedition was 90 days. We covered, I believe, 4,600 miles. We began in Portland, Oregon, then rode west from Portland to Astoria down the coast, and then proceeded to head east. We were fully self-contained. We didn't have a sag wagon or van. We had 1 liter. Every day we would buy our food, carry it to our campsite, and cook it. And 90 days of biking across the country. And keep in mind, prior to that, I'd never gone on an overnight bike ride. So that was something out of the blue. Wonderful experience. And I thought at the time, wow, this is great. It's a once in a lifetime epic experience, but now that's behind me. So after that summer of 1990, I basically put away my bike. I lost my bike and I didn't have a bicycle for the next 30 years. I didn't ride a bike. I was a runner. And then in 2020, as all of us experienced, there was this pandemic. I was teaching, school would get out early, and I found that I had time on my hands that I needed to stay sane. So I bought a bicycle and I'd go on little rides around the neighborhood and through Seattle. And that was my way of getting some exercise, staying sane. And I remember at one point I went for a ride. I went 10 miles. And I thought to my wife, and I texted my wife, and I said, "You wouldn't believe where I am. I've gone 10 miles. This is crazy. I really feel like I've accomplished a lot." But that was the beginning of my distance biking. And it began there, what's that, 5, 6 years ago during the pandemic. And I've just extended my distances and my travels. And I've now done 5 what we call epic tours.
But going back to the Transamerica,
Sure.
I'm planning to do a drop-in ride. This is the 50th anniversary of the Adventure Cycling Association, and they're offering drop-in rides on 3 of their iconic routes. The Transamerica is one, Golden Gravel is a new route, and the Great Divide mountain bike route, which is the third. So a friend and I are going to drop in Virginia on the Transamerica Trail from Christiansburg to Yorktown to the finish. Do you recall any of the ride in Virginia?
A little bit. This was again 1990. Yeah, that was wonderful. That's how we concluded at that time. Yeah, the full Transamerica as compared to the Trans Am Express finishes, or at least it used to finish in Williamsburg. So going west to east, that was the conclusion. Yeah, I highly recommend if you can do a part or all of any of those 3 epic rides, do it.
You just came back from Chile, I believe. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I have done 5 epic tours. An epic would be multi-weeks. And my wife and I and my family enjoys shorter rides. These would be curated rides. And an organization we love to go with is VBT, Vermont Bicycle Tours. The comparable organization is Backroads.
Okay.
Backroads and VBT are similar. I'd say Backroads is a little more expensive, a little more exclusive, but very similar. They're typically week-long expeditions. About a week ago, my wife and I came back from a 12-day tour in Chile. We spent a week with VBT bicycling around the Santiago area in central Chile, had a wonderful time, and then concluded with a few days in Patagonia. That was I believe, our 8th tour with VBT. So we started out maybe 4 years ago doing a VBT tour in Alsace-Lorraine. Probably our favorite was in Slovenia. And all of these are week-long tours. They're guided. You stay in hotels, wonderful accommodations, expert guides. After Slovenia, we did a tour in New Zealand. We then did Bryce Canyon and Zion in Utah. That was domestic. A couple years ago, we went to Banff and spent a week with VBT in Banff, Alberta, and Kananaskis. 3 years ago, we went to Portugal, and I could talk more about that. It was quite the epic experience, bicycling with my siblings and family. Last year, we were in Burgundy, spent a week in Burgundy, and then, as I mentioned, about a week ago, we came back from Chile. So we love international bike touring, and it's a great way to see and experience different countries, cultures, and scenery.
It seems like you prefer more of the credit card kind of touring, the hotels. Is that true?
I love both. So when I'm with my wife or family, yeah, these would be shorter rides. There's always the van, the sag wagon if a person gets tired. But what I love is you can do what I call bonus miles. If we're finished with a ride and it's early afternoon, I can simply hop on my bike and go out in the countryside and ride around and see some new scenery. But those are in contrast to the epic tours, which are with adventure cycling and camping, and typically about 60 miles a day.
All right, let's talk about your epic tours. Start with one that you really like, and let's hear some stories.
Well, after the Trans Am tour of 1990, as I mentioned, I didn't bike. And then in 2023, I did an epic tour with what's now called Adventure Cycling. And that was, in retrospect, a life-changing experience. That really got me into bike travel, bike touring, and what I've continued to do and do one epic tour a year. That was the Southern Tier. one of the epic tours offered by Adventure Cycling. Began in San Diego, finished on the Atlantic coast of Florida. That was 8 weeks and about 3,100 miles. And I came away from that saying, I don't like this. I love this experience. It was just absolutely wonderful. We had a perfect time of year and a perfect year. We rode across Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico. We rode the width of Texas, and it had been a very wet winter. So the wildflowers, all the wildlife was verdant. It was just gorgeous. I love Texas. Louisiana, I think briefly Alabama, and in Florida. And that was, as I mentioned, just a wonderful experience. And after that, I said, man, this is great. I've got to do something else again. So a Southern Tier really, really whet my appetite for bicycle adventure.
Van supported tour?
Yes, van supported, the typical van supported tours. There's one van, 12 riders, 2 leaders. 1 leader rides sweep each day. The other drives the van. You've got 2 duffel bags. One carries your clothing. The other carries your camping gear. Average of about 60 miles a day. You ride from one destination to the next. You can ride with people or ride alone, but every day you finish at that day's destination. And you're strongly discouraged from hopping in the van. That's only in case of a real emergency. So you're pretty much riding every day that day's destination, which is great.
Not everybody may know this, but on a van supported adventure cycling tour, you also share cooking duties for dinner and for breakfast. I did a van supported tour in Death Valley, and I was partnered up with a guy who sheepishly admitted to me he'd never cooked before in his life and was hoping that I knew how.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, I did all the cooking, so it worked out fine because I do know how to, but he was good at cleaning up. That was so, I mean, it all worked out.
There you go. I can relate to that. I am not much of a cook, but I'm great at preparation, chopping vegetables, cleaning up. So, as you say, it works out. Yeah. So typically you have 12 riders, 2 leaders, that's 14 people every day. 2 people are assigned as cooks. So they go with one of the leaders to a nearby grocery store, do the shopping for the next 24 hours, purchase the food, come back to the campsite, prepare appetizers, prepare dinner, set out a dessert, clean up, get up early the next morning, set out food for breakfast and lunch, put that away, and then you're done for the week. And then next day, 2 other people do it, and you randomly switch off. So it's very equitable. It works out whether you're an expert cook or mediocre or terrible cook like me, it works out.
Yeah, the recipes they give you aren't really complicated. My only regret is that I didn't veer off the suggested menu just a little bit. I could have added some desserts in. We could have added bacon or sausage to the breakfast menu or scrambled eggs. We kind of went with what was provided there. I wish I would have expanded on it a little bit more. Some of the others got a little more creative, which you can do.
Yeah, I've done 3 of these in the last few years with adventure cycling, and I got to say, by and large, the meals are great. Even if you're not a great cook, you figure it out. People make suggestions, and the food really is impressive what people come up with. And we accommodate vegetarians or vegans. Everybody is well fed.
All right, Southern Tier, what else?
So Southern Tier, that was in the spring of 2023. Great leaders, veteran tour leader. From there, in the summer of 2024, I did the Trans Am Express. So as I mentioned, my first ride was the full Trans Am. They now have the Trans Am Express, and that went from the East Coast, starting in Washington, D.C., and then finished on the coast of Oregon, in Florence, Oregon. That tour was 11 weeks and about 3,800 miles. Another fantastic experience. Van supported. People I met on that are friends today. I routinely text with them. Great experiences. Last year in 2025, I did 2 epic tours. The Journey to the East with TDA, Tour de Afrique. That was in the summer, about 1,800 miles, 6 weeks in South Korea and Japan. And then I followed that up last fall with another adventure cycling tour. This was the Pacific Coast. I figured, you know what? I've ridden across the United States 3 times now, each a slightly different route. Now it's time, instead of going sideways, I want to go top to bottom. So last fall, the Pacific Coast Tour starts in Blaine, Washington at the Canadian border, and then finishes at the border wall south of you, south of San Diego at the U.S.-Mexican border. The Pacific Coast Tour is about 2,000 miles, 6 weeks through Washington, Oregon, and California. I live in Washington, and you basically don't see the ocean because the route, there is no coastal route here in Washington State. But once you cross the Columbia into Astoria, you're following the coastline of Oregon and California. Fantastic experience. We had great weather, only 2 days of really heavy rain. So that was my most recent epic tour.
Compare and contrast. You've done adventure cycling, you've done TDA. Compare and contrast not just the location and the distances and so forth, but the difference between those two types of tours and those tour operators.
Sure. Well, my next one, epic tour for this year, is going to be what TDA calls the Orient Express, and that's riding from Paris to Istanbul. That'll be 7 weeks and 2,400 miles. TDA is much more international, so they have epic tours in every continent, and those are really true adventures. The original namesake tour, Tour d'Afrique, goes from Cape to Cairo, Cairo, Egypt, down to the Cape Town in South Africa. And that's what they're really known for. That was the original tour, I think, was 7,000 miles. So people who've done the TDA tour are real veterans of adventure cycling and camping. What we did in South Korea and Japan was staying in hotels because it's a little more difficult to camp. But the tour I'll be doing this summer, Orient Express, will be camping. TDA is a larger group. You'll have cyclists, participants from all over the world, and leaders from all over the world. I think we had 5 different leaders. They have a full-time bike mechanic who accompanies you. TDA also has what they call a content creator, someone who's taking pictures and posting to social media, as a full-time participant, a bike leader, and maybe 2 assistant leaders. In contrast, adventure cycling, as I mentioned, the van-supported tours will have 2 leaders, 1 van, and you're cooking every night, as opposed to the TDA. And that's primarily domestic, and adventure cycling, those are tours in the United States. Both tours averaging 50 to 60 miles a day, but depending on whether you want to travel internationally or domestically, you can choose.
What made you decide to do the tour of South Korea and Japan?
It was a new adventure. I love to take on adventures, see new sights, experience new cultures, meet new people. So that was next on the bucket list.
Had you ever been to either one of those regions before?
Nope. And so I find bicycle touring, especially in an organized group where they set out the itinerary, they take care of the logistics. Wow. To me, that's a perfect way to travel.
How do you like the interview so far? If you like it, please support my effort to keep publishing this podcast. The best support you can provide is to subscribe. That way you'll be notified when a new episode drops. Tell your friends, leave comments, share the link. These are all good ways to help me promote Chainwheel Diaries. Also, if you're a bike traveler, bike packer, or bike adventurer, and you have stories to share, drop me a line, Brian Berlin at chainwheeldiaries.com. Link below. And thank you very much for listening. Now back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about the Adventure Cycling Association. Sounds like we're both members.
Yep. Adventure cycling's been around since, as you know, 1976. It began with a sort of slightly disorganized tour to celebrate the United States' bicentennial, and a bunch of people got together and they set out a rough itinerary, and they had different starting times and places, but bicycled across the country. And the following year, they said, hey, that was fun. Let's do it again. And it's continued. So for the first roughly 15 or 20 years, it was called Bicentennial, then changed its name to Adventure Cycling.
They've fallen on some difficult financial times.
Yes.
Membership has halved pretty much from 40,000 to around 20,000. They recently debated selling the headquarters building in Missoula, Montana. They had 2 votes. The second vote reversed the first, and they decided not to sell the headquarters. That was money that the current leadership felt they would need in order to be able to build up their reserves. When that vote passed, then the new executive director, Andy Williamson, left. He'd only been there about 4 months. Presumably, he was behind the effort to sell the building and build up the cash reserves. I hope this organization sticks around for a while. What's your opinion?
I am a big believer and supporter of adventure cycling. They've had some difficult decisions. They've made some poor decisions, but their mission is wonderful. I wholeheartedly support it. I am confident they will survive one way or another. I just hope that the folks who voted against the decision to sell the building come forward with support and leadership to make it successful.
Yeah, I agree. If indeed they want to hang on to that asset, then they need to insert themselves into the discussion so that they can make sure that if that money's not coming in, they have other plans and they're willing to share those.
Yeah, adventure cycling, the leaders are by and large fantastic. They're committed to cycling. Their mission is wonderful. Get people out, explore, whether it's a self-supported, a short weekend, or van supported, whether you're out for a few days or a few months. I want them to succeed, and I'm confident they will.
What upcoming adventures do you have planned?
My siblings and I are doing another VBT tour in June. That will be in Lake Como in northern Italy. So that will be a
Mm.
week. And then I'll come back and then return to Europe for the Orient Express, which is 7 weeks in July and August, bicycling across Europe. Again, I think that's 8 countries, most of which I have never visited. So, really looking forward to that. One of my themes is every day is an adventure, and I try to live it on these epic tours.
You certainly are. What kind of bike are you riding on these tours?
I'm a little unorthodox in that I do not clip in. So my equipment is, I'm super uncoordinated. If I were to clip in, I would be hospitalized frequently due to crashes. My original bike until last summer was a Cannondale Synapse aluminum frame bike, and I would ride it with old pair of running shoes. So I rode across the country with that for a couple times. And then this summer, I upgraded and bought a Specialized Roubaix. And about half the people I know and bicycle with now seem to own a Roubaix. I've named my bike Robert because it's a Roubaix. It's American designed, manufactured in Taiwan with Japanese components and a French name. So what's more French than Robert the Roubaix?
What is special about that bike for touring?
Electric shifters, hydraulic brakes, carbon fiber frame. I'm not a tech guy. I'm sorry, the opposite, but it fits me. I love the responsiveness. It's durable. It's a great bike.
I know what you're saying about not clipping in. I ride flat pedals as well. And it's not about clipping in, it's about being able to clip out. I can't tell you the number of
Yes.
times I've seen cyclists go down when they couldn't get their foot disengaged from the pedals. And I don't want to be part of that scenario.
Yeah. Brian, I am with you 100%. It's not clipping in, it's clipping out. And yeah, every time you shift gears or come to an abrupt stop, I would do a face plant.
Part of the idea behind this podcast is let's encourage people and inspire them to get out there and explore by bicycle. What advice would you give somebody who's thinking about doing something like that?
Start small, find your comfort zone, and then build from there. If you need an e-bike, great, ride an e-bike. It's a great way to get started. And the e-bikes, I consider e-bikes the equalizer bikes, especially for going up hills. New bicycle riders often really find it struggles. Ride a few miles, join a club. I'm a member of 2 local bicycle clubs, and you can do group rides on weekdays, weekends. I've done here in Western Washington. They have 2 big rides each summer. One is STP, Seattle to Portland. That's about 200 miles over 2 days. It is not a race. I emphasize not a race. It's a ride. It gets about 5,000 riders. It's great fun. Test yourself. We get all types of riders. And the other is RSVP. Instead of going south from Seattle, it goes north. RSVP stands for Ride from Seattle to Vancouver and Party. If you want to be really ambitious, you can do it in one day, but I'm out to have a good time, not to suffer.
You've done the STP, I take it.
Yeah, I've done STP, I think, 3 times and RSVP twice. And I just love it. The camaraderie, the scenery. You can ride with a friend, you can ride with a group, you can catch up with others, you can ride alone. The weather's usually wonderful. You're roughly paralleling Interstate 5, but you're not on it. You're out in the countryside. Great experience.
So it's a couple of 100 miles, right?
Each of those is roughly 200 miles. Yep.
You take a break in between. How far do you go each day?
Midway, so the halfway point, they set up the organizers. Cascade Bicycle Club sets up overnight accommodations. You can have a tent or stay in a hotel in Centralia, Washington. That's halfway to Portland. Or if you're going north, in Bellingham, Washington. So you spend one night if you're doing it in 2 days, and then get on your bike the second day and ride the roughly next 100 miles to the destination.
What do you think the advantages of belonging to a group or a club? You belong to a couple of clubs. I'm president of a local bike club. I see some of the advantages, but some people feel like they need to be riding alone. But what do you see as the advantages?
I do most of my riding alone, but once a week maybe I'll join up with a group, and the club rides, they're wonderful. I don't have to organize it. It's a way for me to learn new itineraries, new locations, converse with others on the ride. It forces me to get out on days when I might not otherwise. And it's at my own convenience. So group rides, club rides, I find wonderful as a way of sort of augmenting the solo rides I typically engage in.
I'm with you. And I try to explain to people, it's not a group ride where you're all in a peloton constantly going at the same pace. The riders spread out and it's the destination. We ride, 20 miles to get coffee. Everybody meets up there and sits around and talks about bikes and coffee, and then we hop back on our bikes and go our separate ways. So I think there's a misconception there. But I enjoy those rides. I also enjoy solo rides, and I'm going to do a long one on Friday, 74 miles. So.
And another thing I'd add, Brian, is you pick the ride that matches your pace. Every ride says we're going to go at this pace, whether it's 12 miles an hour, average 15 miles an hour, or something more aggressive. Pick a ride that meets your comfort level and your distance. So these are not races, they're rides, whether it's very casual and at a modest pace or something much more ambitious.
Sounds good, Stephen. Well, any final thoughts as we part ways?
Yeah, part of why I love riding is the adventure and the experience. About every year I come up with a new theme, whether it's every day is an adventure or I love this stuff. Last year or so, I've found myself on a beautiful day. When I finish a ride, I tend to ride into the campground and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And there are days when I find myself just pinching myself and saying, man, this is fantastic. And there are many days where I finished a ride and said on a scale of 1 to 10, this was a 12. Everything just clicked. The weather was spectacular. It was sunny. It was warm. It was new scenery, place I'd never been to. You're out experiencing something new. You're self-propelled. You have a sense of accomplishment. You can ride with others, the sense of camaraderie. To me, it's just a fantastic way of traveling, of exercising, of getting out, of experiencing life, experiencing the country.
The world looks a lot different when you're going 10 to 13 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, and to me, that's the perfect pace. I mean, some people love walking, jogging, or hiking. Other people like to travel, in a car at 60 miles an hour. But as you mentioned, 15 miles an hour on a bike, self-propelled, to me, that's ideal. You're going to see, experience, and feel things you're not going to otherwise.
I like your use of themes. Mine is ride the one you're with. I've got a 2010 Surly long haul trucker. That's my everyday bike and my touring bike. I love that bike. I don't feel the need to upgrade.
You don't need an expensive carbon fiber brand new bike. There are people, who are riding 15-year-old bikes, hand-me-downs, and completing epic tours on them. So find your comfort level and get out.
Sounds good, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I hope our paths cross someday. Maybe we'll do a bike ride together. Who
I
knows?
love that. I love it. Bike traveling, bike touring, to me, it's awesome. So it's been a pleasure talking with you, Brian.
Thanks again.
You bet.